Thank you, Star. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Harker. And thank you, Guy, for that wonderful song. It's going to be very appropriate here shortly. Well, I'm thrilled to be back. I would much prefer to be over there in Santa Rosa along with you personally. And I'm sure a lot of you would like to be back together again, too. But that is not to be for the time being. I hope everybody's doing well with this COVID-19 and some of our isolation. I know Paul and I are staying very busy. We're taking classes online. I'm plugging in some of my old discs from the Learning Company and the great courses. We're walking, we're exercising, all except for walking in the snow the last 2 days. I don't know about you, but we've got about 18 inches of snow. So, and I'm not about to walk in that. So we're doing well, but we're looking forward to the day that we're going to have our shots. So far, it's been a little slow in getting shots here in Hooterville, but we're hoping that it picks up a little bit. Now, the topic today is about sleepwalking, and part of it came because I'm going to be preparing another talk on, and I told this to Guy, zombies. But I thought, you know what, zombies are getting overrated at this point. So why don't we just change it to something else? And I changed it to sleepwalkers instead of zombies. As a child, I was a sleepwalker. It was very interesting. At least that's what my parents tell me. I would get up and walk around in the living room and through the den and do different things, and then just walk back to bed and go sound asleep. And normally sleepwalking is very benign, except for one evening when I got up, walked into the living room and started to go to the other end of the house. And my mother said, "Larry, where are you going?" She knew I was asleep. And I said, "I'm going to the bathroom." Okay. But immediately I walked into their bedroom instead. So she quickly came and got me and put me back in bed. Sleepwalkers. Here's how it ties into everything. I personally believe that at the core of all the great philosophies and religions of this world, and that is Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, every last one of them, their core message is wake up, be fully conscious. It's as simple as that. I don't know if you're familiar with the writer Cynthia Bourgeault. She wrote a book a number of years ago, and she gave one of the clearest explanations of what our faith is really all about. Let me quote it for you. Our only truly essential human task here on earth, Jesus teaches, is to grow beyond the survival instincts of the animal brain and the egoic operating system, and grow into the joy and generosity of full human personhood. His mission, that is of Jesus, was to show us how to do it. Simple as that. Outgrow the primitive brain into something she calls full personhood. That's it. If you're not doing that, then you're not enjoying the fullness of life and you're sleepwalking. Because it's only when you're in that fullness that you really see what is truly there and can experience the world in its fullness. And here's the good news. I've got a passion right now for studying brain science. And one of the things I've learned in studying is that we already have everything we need in terms of our brains necessary for that transformation. You don't have to pray for anything except use what you already have. So let me explain. Our brain is divided into sections. One of them is the most primitive brain of all, the reptilian brain. It's very automatic. It's very animalistic. Its interest is in survival, in food, and procreation. It's all about feeling good, being safe. Then we have a midbrain. That gets a little more complicated and it's more complex. That midbrain can be a little bit selfish. It wants to look after itself. It's short-sighted and it likes things more immediate. Plus, one of the big disadvantages is it thinks dualistically. It's either good or bad, black and white, up or down, right or wrong, reward or punishment. Have you known people like that? Well, there's also a cortex, and especially the prefrontal cortex. We all have one, I hope. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be sitting here listening to me. This is a place of higher consciousness in human beings. This is where all those religions and philosophies are pointing us to. In that prefrontal cortex, we can see the big picture. We don't just see a small part of it. We can see how things relate. We can even take contradictions to each thing and understand the contradictions and accept them. In addition to that, it allows us, something very special, to be able to feel empathy and compassion. So there it is. Everybody's got one. Our job is to get out of that reptilian brain, as Cynthia said, and as Jesus recommended in just a different way, and get into our higher consciousness. The only drawback is it takes time, training, and effort to open up that prefrontal cortex. All the research I've studied, whether it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Frederick Hertzberg, let's see who else, James Fowler, Lawrence Kohlberg, all of you that are in the Bible class know those names. All those studies, all those hierarchies, only about 1 to 5% of human beings reach the top. Jesus said, the fields are ripe, but the workers are few. Very few people want to put the time, energy, and effort in to opening up that prefrontal cortex and developing it. So what happens? You sleepwalk. People that aren't able to do that are sleepwalkers. They'll never fully be awake. But there's reasons for some of this. How much, if I were to say, how much of your brain takes up the energy that you consume? In other words, if you take in 100 calories, how much of that 100 calories is the brain going to use compared to the rest of the body? I know some people say 5, 6, 8%. On average, 25% is used by the brain. It consumes a lot of energy. And it will do everything it can to conserve energy. And one of the things that it can do is rely on habit and automatic responses for the body to function and the mind to function. The only problem is some of those automatic habits are just nothing but going to sleep. So let me share with you what will keep you asleep or what puts you to sleep in the first place. The first thing I can think of are our belief systems. We all have beliefs, right? From our very first days on this planet, our parents were teaching us beliefs. Schools teach us beliefs. Churches, political parties, culture, there's all sorts of beliefs that we're given. The mistake we make is we think that they're telling us the truth, when in fact, what they're sharing with us is their belief. And sometimes we never question those beliefs. And so we put them on automatic. And throughout our life, we continue to do the same thing, believing the same thing. We never question them. We never ask why, because that takes energy. That takes effort. And especially when the answer comes back and it doesn't match what we want with our belief system, and we're going to have to change. And if you have to change your belief, guess what you're going to have to change? Your brain. And it doesn't want to do that. But that's what's required. It may seem difficult, but it is doable. And it's what we need to do in order to move forward and have that transformative moment. We also sometimes get into a feeling of comfort with those old beliefs. We don't want to change them because they're comfortable, like an old shoe, or in my case, old shirts and old t-shirts. Wear them. They're very comfortable. But you know what? Sometimes you have to get a new one. And it a little bit of a stretch when you're attached to the old one. But that's what you need to do to make that transformation. You have to push and change your mind. So all that's holding us down. What can we do to wake up? Dr. Phil once said, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So what we have to do is acknowledge and go in and do self-reflection. Look at what we think. Look at what we believe. Look at how we act. Look at our feelings. Observe all those things and see what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what response it has. If you can do that, you can then set an alarm clock to wake you up while we're out there in the world doing our daily things. Now, you can't carry it. I guess you could in this modern day with the cell phone. You could set your alarm clock to go off. But the thing to do is to put something in your mind that will wake you up any moment of the day that you're challenged, something comes up, and you want to be reminded that you can go higher. For example, you go to the store. Somebody is in line. They have more groceries in their basket than they're supposed to when they're in that quick line, 15 items or less, and they have 45 items plus. They're fumbling with their change, and all of a sudden you want to just simply go ballistic. You need something to remind you that's not real. It's quite all right. There's no harm done. It's not really a big deal. And why should you react to something like that? That takes you out of the kingdom. That throws you into that dualistic thinking. So if you have a mantra, or if you're like Guy, you're a musical person, you may have a song that you could bring up in your head. You sing it to yourself. And in that moment, you break that chain of thought from your reptilian brain, your immediate reaction. And what happens is you can now pause and say to yourself, I want to do something different. And you can choose to do something from a higher consciousness. In fact, we're going to do that during the meditation today. I'm going to give you a chance to practice some of that. So once we have that break, we can create a new action, a new way of thinking. And you're beginning to make patterns in your brain that are different. And what happens is, as Dr. Phil, we started with him, we'll end with him, said, what you do is you replace one habit, which is that reptilian brain reaction, with a new habit, which is that higher order opening up, accepting, and even blessing the moment. I remember seeing a movie a number of years ago. I think it was called A Beautiful Mind. Oh, geez. Russell Crowe played the lead. John Nash was the name of the man he played. And he was a paranoid schizophrenic. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. Absolutely wonderful. He was a paranoid schizophrenic, and yet he became a Nobel laureate in economics. Brilliant mind. But he would have these episodes where a federal agent would come to him and tell him that he was under investigation and that there were spies. He would have a little girl, I think it was, that came to him and told him stories and made him think things. And there might have been a third character that they all appeared. Guess what? They're all in his mind. They weren't real. And for years and years, he followed their instructions, just like we follow those old beliefs, those old habits, those old thoughts that really aren't appropriate. Nash would follow them, and it got in his way of being the brilliant man that he was. He finally was treated and was able to put them at bay, yet they showed up occasionally. But he didn't listen to them anymore. His alarm clock went off. He had a way of telling, you're not real. Do you remember how he knew they weren't real? It was brilliant. He looked at him and says, you don't age. And sure enough, the characters never aged in his head. They were always the same, yet he knew he was aging. They can't be real. And that's the way we want to respond to the thoughts in our heads, the beliefs that we have that are not real any longer and that we can change. And what we want to do is replace them with the real thoughts, the higher thoughts, those thoughts that we, as the scientists would say, get out of your prefrontal cortex. Jesus would say, that are from the Father, that are from the higher self. Whatever terminology we want to use, that's where we want to go with this, and not into that lower brain where we're sound asleep. The question I had then was, does it last? And the answer is no. Based on what I've discovered, it doesn't always last. You're going to fall back. We go to sleep. But the key is you keep waking up over and over and over again. And each and every time you practice waking up and coming from that higher consciousness, it gets easier and easier until you can do it just about any time you want. And when that happens, what we see is a different life around us, because we're no longer seeing it through sleepy eyes of the sleepwalker, but we're seeing it through the eyes of a wide awake human being. Now, before I close, I'd like to share with you a story about two men who were sleepwalkers, each in their own way. Yet they both woke up. It's a true story. Paul and I were watching Oprah. It's a number of years ago. Remember when the old Oprah show was on? Oprah had on a guest. He was Jewish. He had been born and raised in the North, but his company sent him to the South, what we would call the Deep South. And those of you that have ever lived in the Deep South know that it can be very, shall we say, slow to develop in terms of racial relationships and things like that. He no sooner got there and was settling in, and he began to get telephone calls. And they were threatening telephone calls from what was obvious, someone who was either a skinhead, anti-Semitic, but in some way that just did not want somebody who was Jewish in their town. He began to get frightened. And so he decided to go and contact the police. He went to the station. The police knew who was calling him. They said, we know the organization, we know the people, and we think we even know the person that's calling you. But we can't do anything until something really happens. Have you heard that before? Yeah. Well, he went home and he decided to do something different. He says, you know what, instead of pushing back against this hate group, instead of hanging up on them, instead of attacking, instead of trying to get the police, I'm going to show them kindness. And so sure enough, the next time that person called, he gives kindness instead, talks very pleasantly with him. This happened just a couple of times, and the phone call slowed down, and then they changed in character a little bit. But he kept showing kindness, no matter what the skinhead said. And finally, one day, when he's called, the man says, look, can we meet and talk? Well, he was a little bit cautious about this. He said, yes, but we got to go someplace very public. There's a big boy restaurant in town, big glass windows up front. Let's go to the big boy where everybody can see us, because he didn't know what was going to happen. They sat down and they talked. And interestingly, they have some things in common. And lo and behold, they decide to meet a couple more times and they share. At one meeting, the skinhead tells him, he says, I've got a problem. My fellow members are starting to turn on me. He said, why? He said, because I've been meeting with you. And he said, I'm starting to be ousted and they're starting to get mad at me. And I have no place to go. I've been living in with the group. And the Jewish gentleman said, I tell you what, we've got an extra bedroom and bathroom and everything in the back of the house. Would you like to come and live with us? And so sure enough, he moves in. Now, a number of months pass and the skinhead is still living there. And he comes to him and he says, what is it you're doing every Friday night? He said, we go to church. We go to Sabbath. He said, that's interesting. He said, can I come along just to see what it's like? He goes along. Lo and behold, as the months pass, he decides to take instructions and converts to Judaism. It'd been about a year, and then he has an announcement to make. He said, I'm sad to tell you, but I've got cancer, and it's very aggressive. And so the gentleman said, I tell you what, you stay with us, we'll take care of you. And sure enough, he stayed with them until his dying day. And when he was buried, his tombstone had a Star of David. These two men started out polar opposites, and in fact, enemies. And they became friends. That's what Cynthia Bourgeois was talking about. That's what Jesus was talking about. That's what all these great philosophies and religions are talking about. Overcoming that reptilian, reactive, animalistic brain, going higher to where the world is a very different place for us when we come from that. We're no longer sleepwalking. Nope. We're wide awake, which is the way we're supposed to be. And that's your lesson for today. When I first came on, Starr mentioned that the daily word was very appropriate to my talk today. And I hope this meditation, which is based on some of that, works for everybody. This is a little bit different than you normally hear, but I think you will enjoy it. So take time now, if you will, to get relaxed, get into a comfortable position. And for this meditation, I invite you to close your eyes if you don't mind, if it's okay. And for just a moment, focus on the rise and the fall of your chest as you breathe in and you breathe out. And I would like you, if you will, to imagine that you're driving on a multi-lane highway. Beautiful surroundings. There's only moderate traffic. There's no problems. You're safe. But now you're approaching a construction zone, and traffic is being directed into one lane. And you get into that lane. All of a sudden, a car comes whizzing by you, gets up near the front and pulls in. They couldn't wait. Notice your emotional response. Have you had this happen before? What was your response? Anger? Judgment? That's the lower consciousness acting. So we're going to wake up real quick and say, no, you know what? It's just a few car lengths. The person's probably asleep, but I'm not going to go to sleep because of them. And we bring our thoughts back to the day and how beautiful it is, the fact that we're safe and that traffic is moving. And now you're at, if you will, imagine the bank or the credit union. You actually need cash for something. The ATM is down, so you're going to have to go inside and get cash from a teller. And while they're preparing to get you your cash, where's your mind? Is it wandering? Is it somewhere else thinking about how you're going to spend the money? For just a moment, bring it back to the teller. Do you really notice that child of God that's standing in front of you? Do you take a conscious moment to look at their name tag and even refer to them by name? Do we wake up and notice the people around us? Really notice. being an angry, upset driver, or being a client at the bank or credit union who is distracted, is all coming from a lower center. Yet we can go higher. We can allow those things that really don't bother us, let them go. Stay focused on what's beautiful and wonderful. See the people around us, acknowledge them. This is what it takes to begin to see the world in a very different way through the eyes of an awake person. And we can all do it. So again, focus on your breathing, the rise and the fall of your chest. Slowly open your eyes and be present. I affirm that we are all waking up. Everything that we need to transform our lives is literally within us. Today, we claim that truth, we act on it, and awaken to the truly magical, mystical, and abundant life that is all around us. Amen.